right, welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk About This. I'm excited to have this young man on the podcast today. After reading his story, I was inspired to have him on, and I'm sure everybody else is going to be inspired too. His name is Anthony McDuffie Jr. He's an author, he's a motivational speaker, he's a spoken word artist, he's a certified mental health first aider, and he's known for his memoir, Grit, Grind, and Glory, which can be found throughout the world in countries such as the UK. And he got the book holding it up right there. You can get it in the UK, you can get it in Canada, and you can get it in Kuwait. He's emerging from 15 years in prison, and now he shares his story globally around the world. And I'm just excited to have you on, Anthony. How you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much, sis, for inviting me on your platform. It's an honor.
Thank you for taking the time out, because I know you got a busy schedule, you know. I mean, because so many people are inspired by your story. So was I. That's why I had to get you on. And
Mm,
I wanted you to take me back to your childhood. You know,
mm,
we all grew up in the hood. I grew up in the hood, and we have people in our families who experience being in prison for certain things that happen in their life. And you're not defined by your environment. You know what I mean? So take me back to your childhood, where your struggles first began, and into what led you into prison, and how you decided to turn your life around and help other people with your story.
yeah, thank you for the question, sis. So I'll start. I guess the perfect way to start it is to give you some historical continuity about my family background. I have
Okay.
Southern roots. My grandparents came from the South, from Louisiana, Kansas, and then my other grandparents came from other parts of Louisiana as well. Once they migrated from the South, they came to the West Coast and landed themselves in South Central Los Angeles. And my father's side located themselves in Watts, California. So South Central Los Angeles, Watts, California, and throughout that region. So Compton and Linwood, and all parts of Los Angeles County is where they resided once they came from the South. So that's when my mom met my father. They met in, again, Watts, California, borderline South Central. They fell in love. My mother and my father at that time, because my mother was the newbie in the community, in the neighborhood. And
Mm-hmm.
so when she met my father already had a long-term relationship sort of situation already going.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of led to a sort of rivalry within the community. And we know how it is, right? When someone new on the block come, get somebody else's man, it creates a
Right.
type of situation. So anyway, I was created from that type of situation or whatnot. Grew up with my father. My father was a very loving man, very supportive, provided for the whole household. At that time, my mother had up to about 5 or 6 children at that time, which
Mm-hmm.
is my older siblings, brother and sisters. Um, and I would like to say that at that point, I really didn't know the sort of struggles that we had to deal with within our community, because I was sheltered from it as much as my parents could possibly shelter us from it. Um,
Okay.
so so I would like to say that I had a good upbringing coming up with my father and my mother all the way up into a point. And so my father had diabetes, and he was, I guess you could say, diagnosed with diabetes at a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
And the upkeeping of it, he just didn't upkeep his health. And so his health declined very early on.
Okay.
Again, me and my father was very close. In fact, I would like to say I was closer to my father than my mother,
Mm-hmm.
based on the connection we had. And then based on when his health declined, I was sort of that son, because I was his first son. I was sort of that son that had the connection with him like no other sibling.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So with that bond, it created this connection that was sort of inseparable, to the point where I was sleeping on my father's chest almost every night when we went to sleep with one another or whatnot. So up until about 7 or 8 years old, his health started to decline really bad, to the point where he started to go into diabetic comas. And I always dreaded those moments and those times where I was away from my father. But this specific moment, it was just like really, really, I guess you could say, really tragic, in a way where I knew my father wasn't going to come back because of how long he was hospitalized. And then I was kind of hearing like family chatter that he was on life support, sort of thing. And they were trying to debate whether or not to pull a plug on him. And as a young person, I'm hearing the conversation, I'm hearing the chatter, but I just don't really understand how serious and severe it was at that time. And hearing the news probably about a week, 2 weeks after, from my aunt, that my father died, really just devastated me, to the point where I didn't know how to move forward with my life. I mean, my father was my guide. He was my protector. He was my provider. He was my superhero. So when I got the news that he died, it really didn't register until I went to the funeral and seen him in the casket, and then we buried him. And I just remember that moment and that time, me feeling just this overwhelming sense of grief, sadness. And I would love to say that at that time, no one really consoled me the way I would have had liked to be consoled during that time of grief. And I would like to believe my mother, given she understood what I was going through at such a young age, would have potentially tried to provide that as much as she possibly could. But because she was already dealing with her own problems and dealing with her own grief, and on top of 6 siblings, she just didn't know how at that time to console me and give me the intention and the love and the security that I needed at that time. So as a result, I looked at it as she was being neglectful and she was abandoning my feelings. So because I seen it that way, I started to pull away from my mother, and I started to hold anger and resentment towards her. All the way up until a point, and I alluded to it in the book, where I said it was almost as if I blamed her for my father's death. So it's almost like she was the cause of it in my head. So that caused the emotional detachment. And as time went on, I just got more rebellious and more angrier and more frustrated with my mom, all the way to the point where we couldn't even be in each other's space without bumping heads. And as a young mother, and as a young Black mother, it's only so much a young Black mother can tolerate, on top of bills, on top of personal responsibilities, on top of, all of these other complexities. It's only so much she can deal with. And so she told me, like, if you're not going to abide by the rules and the conditions that I set for in my household, then you're going to have to go somewhere else. And me being rebellious at that time, I'm just like, you know what? Forget you, forget the household. I'm going to run the streets. And so that's what I did. I ran the streets and ran away from home. And we all know what's going on in the hood, the elements that's going on right outside of your house. You're dealing with the drugs, you're dealing with the crime, you're dealing with the gangs, you're dealing with the hyper policing, you're dealing with all of these elements that will influence a young Black boy at an early age to either go down the wrong path or get it right. In my case, I went down the wrong path. So as early as 13 years old, I'm going back and forth in juvenile hall. I'm not going to school. I'm ditching school. And if I am in class, I'm being the class clown, or I'm fighting other kids. I'm being real disruptive. All the way to the point they're kicking me out. So now by 14, 15 years old, I'm in and out of the juvenile detention centers. getting into fights. At this point, 13, 14, I'm already initiated into a gang. So now I'm incorporating that persona and that personality that I built within a gang. And now my life is just turning into a downward spiral. And I'm wilding out. And I have no direction. I have no guidance. And now it's just like I'm becoming this career criminal. So by 15, 16 years old, I'm committing all sorts of crimes. Every time I get out of the juvenile detention center, I get back out only to reoffend and commit another crime to go right back in. And it just became a reoccurring process. And I didn't know how to really get myself out of it. And so at 17 years old, I got shot at, and some people within the community that I represent also got shot at. So I went back on a gang retaliatory shooting, ended up shooting 4 people at 17 years old and getting sentenced to 25 years in state prison. Should I stop there or?
No, keep going. Keep going.
So at that, at that age and at that time, 17 years old, in my mind, first of all, at 17 and experienced so much in the street life and also experienced so much in the juvenile hall facilities, you get to a point where you feel like you know it all, or you feel like you figured it out. And obviously now looking back in hindsight, I realized I had nothing figured out. But in my head at 17 years old, I thought I had it all figured out. So with that sort of distorted mentality, my mind was twisted. My habits was twisted. My thinking was twisted. I thought that if you didn't, align yourself or have an alliance with the gang that I represented, somehow you was my enemy. And that goes from, other Black people, other brown people, white people, police, any and everybody who didn't have an alliance to the gang I represented was considered to be an enemy. And again, that warped my thinking even further to where it limited me to being social. So I didn't even want to be like, a normal social person when I went out into environments, because in my, my false sense of belief systems, I felt everyone outside of the gang wasn't really for me or didn't really have my best of interest in mind and heart. Now, mind you, the gang replaced my father. So the same father figure, or the same guidance, I should say, I was looking for in a father figure, I end up replacing that with older figures in a gang. And they gave me love and support, but it was a false sense of love and support that they gave me. At that time, I needed any and everything. So I was willing to take their sense of false sense of love and their false sense of support. And I took it to my head and to believe it as it being real and authentic. And so with that, I started to do any and everything for the cause of the gang. To prison, now sentenced to 25 years in state prison. I'm like, what do I do? How do I figure this out? And I remember my mother, and just to give you a quick flashback, before I actually caught my crime, my mother told me, son, you've been doing this, you've been doing that, you're doing too much. Like you have to go to work the next day, but yeah, you trying to go to a football game, leave out of my house, and you got on all of these gang colors, and I just don't want you to leave outside of the house. And I was, again, being disruptive, being defiant, disobeying my mom's orders. And she says, son, if you leave out of this house, I'm not going to see you again for a long, long time. Please don't leave my house. And I'm like, Mom, don't even worry about it, man. I'm going to a football gang. I'll be, you tripping, you wilding. She's like, son, please don't leave out of my house. And I left out of the house, and I didn't see her again for 15 years later. So it was the intuition that was speaking to her. So again, so now I'm in juvenile hall being bounded over to adult court, sentenced to 25 years in state prison. I'm looking at my mom, sad, confused, hurt, defeated. And I'm like, Mom, what do I do now? I got 25 years in state prison. How do I get through this? And she said, son, get around the Muslims.
Mm.
Now, why would my mom say that? I don't know. We're not Christian. I didn't come. I mean, excuse me, we're not Muslim. I didn't come from a household of Muslims. My mother's Christian, her sister's Christian. We all grew up Christian. So
Right.
I don't know why she told me to get around the Muslims and I'll get out. But I kept that in the back of my head as I was navigating the prison system. And so I'll pause there in case you may have some other
Well, the
questions.
only question I have is, now you said that you shot at how many people?
4 people.
So did you murder these 4 people? That's
No.
what gave you? Okay. All right. My other question was, once you got out of prison, um, let's continue on with your story because I don't want
Okay.
to go too far ahead. So you said you got with the Muslims while you were in prison, and
Yeah.
they
Now,
kind of,
so
okay.
right. So I got with the Muslim brothers, but I was only like at a point in the period of my time incarceration. Prior to that, though, I was still involving myself in gang politics and prison politics, all the
Okay.
way up to a point. So it had to transition.
Right.
Um, but before the transition, I had a lot of older brothers that was part of the tribe. And again, I'm still affiliated at this point within my prison incarceration. So other older brothers was coming to me. At the time, I was the youngest on the yard. I was 18 years old on the prison yard at this time. And I was the youngest on the entire prison yard. Um,
Okay.
or one of the youngest, I should say. And so there was a lot of older brothers from the tribe that took a liking into me, number one. And two, what I found interesting was a lot of them was nourishing, I guess you could say, my intellectual side, I would want to say, because they kept like giving me books. And these at the time I wasn't really a big reader,
Right.
but it was like this is like the one of the laws of the land in this specific prison. It's a maximum level 4 security prison. And for those who know, depending on the level of security, your security level in prison, the the more, so for instance, like level 1 is like less restricted. Like, so like you're able to do more things in the confines of a prison because
Okay.
the security level is so low. So that's why they call it level 1 security. But
Okay.
level 4 security is like a maximum security. So where you're limited to so much you can do. Most of the time that people spend on level 4 security prisons are in cells. They call it cell living. So majority of your time is going to be spent in a cell on a level 4 security prison. So with that said, the most of the things that people are doing in there, because they can't leave out of the cell, are reading. They're reading, they're writing, like these sort of things, exercising, and that's pretty much it.
Right.
Reading, writing, exercising. If you're lucky to have a TV, you get some TV time, but that's about it.
Right.
So this is what cultivated me to read more books. And again, you had tribal men that was part of my tribe giving me these books, educating me in ways. And so I started to build my knowledge up. I started to educate myself more, self-read, so to speak, self-educated, so to speak.
Right.
And from that, I would love to say it helped condition my mind so that at a very young age, I wasn't really running off doing things that a normal person my age at that time would have been doing,
Right.
such as, fighting, such as involving myself in drug usage and abusing drugs, such as involving myself in alcoholism and abusing alcohol. Like, I wasn't doing any of those things. And love to say that the knowledge that the brothers was giving me fortified in my mind and strengthening me in ways where I didn't have to resort to that.
Right.
However, I was still battling elements within me that wasn't righteous, and that was involving myself in the gangs politics and also in the prison politics. So it'd be times where things would come up and I got to get my hands dirty, and that's because that's the law of the land, so to speak.
Right.
You in these type of situations, you have to pick and choose what you're going to involve yourself in or not.
Right.
So it was that sort of situation for me. And then I got to a point where my mind started to grow, and what they call the maturation of the mind, right? The maturity of the mind started to happen and take place with me at around the age of 25, 26. And so I started to be a lot more open with things and a lot more open to people. And in that, I started to develop better communication skills. I started to develop more interpersonal skills. I started to open my mind up to exploring other religions, exploring other languages. And in the West, I seen a brother coming around with an Arabic sign-up list for Arabic class. And at the time, I was in a prison called Calipatria State Prison. And for those who know, in California, this is one of the most violent prison in California. In fact, they call it Death Valley. And they call it Death Valley for a reason. One of the reasons they call it Death Valley because of the heat. It gets up to 130 degrees Fahrenheit on an easy day, 130 degrees. So that's one of the reasons why they call it Death Valley. Another reason why they call it Death Valley is because of the violence that takes place on these prison compounds between inmates, between correctional officers and inmates. This is a very, very hostile and violent environment. So I wanted to get out of the matrix of this prison system and the prison thinking and the prison politics and involve myself in some form of education. So when they came around with the Arabic class, I was so involved and so intrigued by it. It's like, I seen it as one, I'm learning a new language. Two, I'm opening myself up to new things and new understandings. And three, I wanted to start to do something with my life. So again, this is a transition where I'm making in my own consciousness at around 24, 25, going into 26, that I want to be a better version of myself, but I just didn't know how. So I'm seeking out how to do this. I'm seeking out help, guidance from other people who has been going down this path. Seeing how they did it and see what their process was like. So where I go into the Arabic class, and unbeknownst to me, the Arabic class was tied into the religion of Islam. Know that. Now, as I started to learn more of the Arabic, I learned more of the religion as well. It kind of went hand in hand. And at that time, I was a bit fearful of the reaction I would receive from my peers, because typically when you are in prison, you're in the confines of prison and you have involved yourself with gang ties, it's really frowned upon to visit religious gatherings and be a part of the church or be a part of the Muslims. It's frowned upon amongst the gang members because that's just something they feel that should be separated from the gang politics. For whatever reason, they feel that when you intertwine religion with street politics and gang politics and prison politics, it just don't mix. So they like to keep it separated. And so because of that, I had fear of criticism of my peers, wondering what they would think if I would go into these classes to educate myself alongside with these Muslim brothers. But I think what empowered me and encouraged me at that time to keep going with my education was we had a tribal man, our older tribal man that everyone respected, also in the class with me. So at that point, I'm like, well, if they're not saying nothing to him, they shouldn't say nothing to me, so to speak. So anyway, we went through with it. I got educated. Islam started to tap at my heart more and more and more. I started to open myself up to the experience of it. And then at that point was just willing to welcome in God into my life. And then that's when I feel like the transition period started to begin. And then from there, I started to see other people start to come into my life like mentors to steer and direct my path and my course and teach me certain things such as discourses and writing discourses, teaching me how to speak different languages like Arabic and Swahili and Spanish, and teach me different worldly views. And so this is how I started to get up on geopolitics and and these sorts of things. And so I would like to say that was my period of being renewed.
Mm-hmm.
Being renewed. And I was also being prepared to come out here to embark upon my quest, embark upon my journey, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So I was refining myself in these prison cells. I wasn't allowing myself to be in these prison dwellings and just kind of sort of entertain myself until my time is up. Like,
Right.
it was a mentor of mine who said, don't allow now one day to be squandered. So with that being said, I always picked up either a book, or I always meditated, or I always studied, or I always exercised my body, so
Mm-hmm.
that once again, not one day was squandered.
Right.
And I'm so glad that I did that, because I got out with so much ambition. I got
Mm-hmm.
so much education, and I got out with so much drive that I was willing to propel sort of this energy, this
Mm-hmm.
influence, this mentality, this vessel into something that
More
was
positive.
positive.
Right.
Yeah, not just
Right.
for myself,
But for
but for
other people.
others who was looking towards me and looking at me. And I think one of my greatest successes is that I was able to transition from this period of gang banging into now this period of being a motivational speaker and and an inspiration for my peers and
Mm-hmm.
those who traveled that same sort of path that I traveled, and can't really figure out how to get out of it and transition out. I become now sort of that guidance, that beacon of hope.
Mm-hmm.
And so
So
now,
you don't have a lost frame of mindset anymore at this point.
no,
Yeah. Do
no,
you think prison saved your life?
absolutely, absolutely. And the reason why I feel that is because I had to be broken in order
Okay.
to be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
To be broken in order to be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning I had to shatter anything and everything that I felt was of ego and of pride while I was in that prison. So I had to be humble.
Mm-hmm.
And the Lord humbled me in a way where I couldn't seek nobody else's help or aid in that moment
Mm-hmm.
than a higher power, other than the creator. And
Mm-hmm.
so from that humility, I started to rise myself back up. God started to rise me back up. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what gave me my footing.
So
That's what,
now God is using you right now.
absolutely.
From listening to what you're saying, God is, I can relate to that. I can
Mm-hmm.
totally relate to that from something that happened to me a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, you had to humble yourself and you have to turn to God for guidance, for him
Mm-hmm.
to give you direction, because that's the foundation is
Mm-hmm.
spirituality.
Yes.
And I'm just, and I mean, just listening to you, man, you just don't know from the 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 feeling I'm getting right now, just listening to your story, because there's so many young men that live in the hood who got tied up into the gangs and look for the streets for family, and they can relate to this story, and people don't understand that it's so important to read when you
Mm-hmm.
educate yourself. And see, when you lost your father, like you said, you had no guidance anymore,
Mm-hmm.
but you got your guidance from God, and then you got your education from reading, and that alone will change your whole mindset. So your story is, just keep going, because I'm just getting so much out of this. Like I can't even ask so many questions because I want to listen.
Yeah, yeah, and you
But
know what? There was a lot. There was a lot that I still needed to touch upon, and this is why I encourage the listeners and the viewers to go get my book, Grit, Grind, and Glory, because it's a lot also that I didn't. I that I overlooked in
right.
terms of this transition, and also in terms of the process. For
Mm-hmm.
instance, there was a time where, in my early stages of imprisonment, where I had a cellie who, basically humiliated me and made me feel less than and made me feel devalued because my family members wasn't providing for me at that time. And, I didn't have no money on my books. He had a lot of money on his books. He was making spreads and foods and eating it in my face without offering me any meals. And if you know, like I know, if you're in a cell with a person and they cooking up a gourmet meal and you haven't ate, and in their meal, they got beans and chips and rice and sausages, and the aroma of that, you smell it. And so for a person to be in the same cell with you and say they from the same tribe as you, you would think they will offer you a piece of bread. But I wasn't even offered a piece of bread. In fact, I was humiliated to the point where I felt embarrassed about my circumstances. So instead of allowing that to go into my heart, into my head, what I did was thought of an alternative to how do I fix my situation without relying on someone to sort of send me money and fix the situation that way. And so I looked on a canteen list to figure out options of how I can flip something and make a hustle out of it. And what came to mind for me was coffee. And the reason why coffee came to mind is because I did the statistics. The statistics said that 85% of people who are confined drink some form of caffeine. So that number in my head was dollar signs. So I already had a hustle mentality from being raised in the streets. And so all I did was incorporated that hustle mentality and turned myself into an entrepreneur overnight. And so what I did was I bought some coffee and I created what I call coffee bars. So I cut out some piece of plastic and put a teaspoon, 2 teaspoons of Folgers coffee inside the plastic ball. And then I wrote a sign and I put it right by the water fountain where everyone comes to drink water from the prison. And I put the sign right there informing the whole building that I had coffee bars for sale. And overnight, I started making money. And I started also trading things in exchange of what I needed. So for instance, if I needed toothpaste and someone had a toothpaste, I would then exchange about 3-4 coffee bars for the toothpaste. So now I have, the essentials that I need to survive this experience, if you will. So these type of things I've done, I overcame, and I turned, shit into sugar, if you and what I mean by that, I turned my circumstances of nothing into a circumstance of providing and sustaining myself for that time period. So this is the power of how you can allow a circumstance to either define you or you define it. And in circumstance, I defined it. I didn't allow the embarrassment. I didn't allow the humiliation. I didn't allow the criticism of someone else's judgment on me and my family to be just that. In fact, I turned it around and I made something out of it. And it was so incredible that he even said, he was like, man, like, for you to think that up and then for it to happen overnight like that was just genius,
Right.
But at the same time, though, it started to ferment this sense of jealousy and envy in him. And the reason for that is because he wanted to be the person who hand feeds me. And he wanted to be the person who hand feeds me. But I turned that situation around
and you fed yourself.
Exactly. And I fed myself, right? So that kind of created this sense of anger in him. I knew it, but God is so beautiful in his planning that he protected me the whole way. And he didn't allow the envy or jealousy of the next person to run in with me and interact. And so that person was out of the cell before I knew it. And I was off with my journey and protected.
See how God works? God is powerful, man. God is powerful.
Yeah.
I love that. So you got the idea for putting coffee in plastic. I guess you learned that from being on the street selling drugs.
Exactly.
I'm from the hood too. So, but that was a great idea though. You know what I'm saying? You took some coffee and then you used toothpaste and did the same thing.
So with the the reason why I brought toothpaste up is because I used the coffee to barter and trade what I needed. So that's why I use the example of toothpaste.
Okay.
So toothpaste was something that I needed to keep my hygiene up.
Right.
So I would just use coffee to exchange for that. And so, for instance, let's say I ran out of soap.
Right.
Someone would come up to me like, "Hey man, I got some. Hey man, do you have some coffee?" I'm like, "I sure do." "Hey man, do you have some soap?" It's like, "I sure do." Well, can we trade some coffee for soap? Oh, sure. And so that's how I did it.
Right.
And so not only did I leverage the coffee to get the things, the necessities that I needed in prison, but I'm also seeing how coffee was a source that I can also use to bridge the gap of communication between myself and other races and also in other people. So for instance, I would use coffee to leverage relationships. Hey, how you doing, man? Oh, I'm doing good, man. See, now I'm opening people up. We having dialogue, we having conversations. Now, and these are people who probably would be racist towards our race, right? So maybe like a nicely low-rider skinhead, and he probably would have no relations with a black person. But because I'm the coffee man and he wants coffee, I utilize that coffee that he needs to some type of opening and communication between him. So now I know his name. His name may be Dirty Red. Dirty Red may be from Orange County. He may have a wife, and see what I'm saying? I use the coffee to now leverage knowledge and intelligence from other people as well. So it was more than just a source of just getting the necessities. For me in prison, I utilized coffee to leverage relationships, open communication, become an entrepreneur, and then also just provide for myself while I was in there. Now, get this, I did it for so long that I was able to open up 3 bank accounts once I got up, and buy a brand new car from a dealership once I got out, and open up an apartment, my first apartment, once I got out, all from coffee.
That's what I'm talking about. Yes. That's what I'm talking. Now, do you have coffee? This is a plug. You need your own coffee now. For those who want to be watching, you need a coffee deal.
Fun fact, when I got out of prison, I was working in a coffee shop. And so I learned how to roast coffee. I learned how to profile coffee. I learned how to shred coffee and get it to, And so coffee became part of my narrative as well.
Right. That's what's up. So what gave you the drive once you did that? When did you decide you wanted to start writing this memoir, this book?
Good question. So I was also working in a hospital when I was in prison. And when I was working in the hospital, there used to be this nurse who used to always see me diligently either reading or writing. And one day she's just like, have you had an idea to write a book? And I was like, no. And she's like, you should write a book. And I was like, maybe, but I didn't really entertain the thought. And so I think, to answer your question, I think I know she planted the seed for me to write the book. Now, once I got out, I was just navigating and transitioning what we call reentry. That's the second phase, if you will, of the transitioning period of an incarcerated person getting out and now trying to transition and navigate the world. They call that aspect transitional or transitioning. So I was transitioning.
Right.
Go ahead.
I want to ask you, when did you write this book while you were in prison, incarcerated, or did you write this book when you came out of prison?
No, I wrote it while I was transitioning.
Okay.
Right. So as I was going through, the transitional housing, they call it transitional housing. Once I was going through that and trying to figure out, because remember, I was 17 years old when I left the streets. I entered back into society at 33 years old. So I'm a grown man, number one. Number two, I don't know how to fully function in this new environment. Society. Everything changed, from computers to all sorts of things. It's a whole new world once I got out. So now I have to navigate that. Now, mind you, they don't teach you nothing in prison to prepare you for it. So you have to learn all of this as if like a new baby, so to speak. I was a new baby born back into the world, and now I'm learning how to walk. I'm learning how to talk. I'm learning how to communicate, right? These sort of things. So during that period is when I sat myself down and I said, you know what? And back to the seed that she planted in prison. I need to write a book. I need to tell. And the reason why I decided to write this book is because a lot of people was going through the period of prison and the horrors of prison and everything that prison encompassed, but they wasn't writing about it. And so how I took it was, this is my way to tell my slave narrative. It's a slave narrative. It's kind of like how our ancestors was on the plantation and they wrote about their experiences with master. Why was that important? That was important so that we can learn and we can understand and we can see exactly what they went through that period. That's why the importance of the slave narratives was extremely important for me. And so I had the same concept when I got out of prison. I need to tell the horrors of what went on in that place, but I also need to tell how I overcame it and what I did to overcome it. And also need to tell how other people can also do the same thing if they find themselves in that predicament. So I thought it was just very, very important for me to explain my narrative to not only my people, but for other people also who can be reading and reading this narrative, how it went down. And I think again, it's a continuation because as we know, prisons are a remake of plantations. There's no difference between prisons and plantations.
That's true.
So if my ancestors was doing slave narratives on the plantation and writing about it, then this is just an extension. And so I am my ancestors. I want to follow in the same lead that they led with documenting and, narrating these processes. And even on the subtitle, I say, I'm surviving the urban city syndrome and incarceration in a post-slavery era of America. So it's still that continuum of the history that's happening in this country. Until it's different, we have to tell it how it is. And so that was the reason why I wrote the book.
Yeah. And I'm going to tell you something, just to elaborate on what you said. And that was the reason why they didn't want us to read back in those slavery times. They didn't want us to have books. Things would happen to our ancestors if they was caught with a book. Now, from your experience and what you went through while you were in prison and educating yourself and how you came out a whole new person, what your mindset, and you just transcend everything now. So now you're teaching and you're learning, and this is important. Your story is so important. Why it's important for us to pick up books and know our history and to read and to educate ourselves. This is what keeps us from doing those negative things that that we shouldn't be out here doing. And that was one of the biggest reasons why they kept books from us. But your story is so amazing. So when you released the book, what year did you release your memoir?
I released it 2022.
Okay. So it's probably a lot of people in prison reading your book right now.
Oh yeah, for sure. In fact, I had a nonprofit organization. It was called LinkedIn. And excuse me, not LinkedIn, I believe it was Linked Out, something like that. But this organization will pretty much facilitated a way for inmates all across the United States of America to receive a book from me. So they was buying 100 books a month and sending them to different prisons all across the United States of America.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So there's people who know my story that I don't even know.
Wow.
So you have that. And then myself personally, back in October of last year, I went into a women's prison and I did a motivational speaking. I did some poetry, and then I started passing out books to the ladies. So there's tons of books inside of the women's prison as well. And so yes, to answer your question, yeah, quite a few people know about my story, inspired by my story. In fact, I received messages from the women, the ladies, and they refer me as to, they refer me as their husband. And so I got a lot of wives out there I don't know about.
Oh,
But what the ladies have said was how I became such an inspiration for them, because a lot of them didn't have men in their lives that looked like me, that had the same story and overcame those odds. So I was just an extraordinary, if you will, empowerment to them women. And they said it to me. They came up to me and told me how much I inspired them, and how much they are motivated by my story. And so my hopes was that I just planted the seed that they can be like me and beyond, and take their story. I think the main point was just for them to take their own personal story and create something from it. And I told them, I said, we all have a unique story, but it's
right.
how you narrate it and it's how you convey it to the world what makes it the difference. So I encourage all of them to write a book, and I encourage all of them to take their story to the next level. Now, here it is. Grit, Grind, and Glory was the name of the book, but now Grit, Grind, and Glory is the name of the brand. So, I'm branded now.
I was just looking at your jacket. That jacket is fly. I need that. How can I get a jacket?
I know I'm about to be selling them on my website, so very soon.
I hope so.
Yeah,
that jacket is fly. I was just looking at that. I was like, yeah, that jacket. I have never seen. You got to put that out soon, because I definitely need. And make sure you get a 2X. That's the
yeah.
You got to get the women. I definitely got to get that jacket.
So yeah, thank you. And so yeah, Grit, Grind, and Glory became the brand, not just the book, but the brand. And now it's associated with fashion design. It's also associated with our audio book. I have an audio book that's also written under Grit, Grind, and Glory. And I'm a CEO of the LLC, Grit, Grind, and Glory LLC. And so I show people how their story can be so much more than just their story.
That's true.
I just showed you how I turned my story into entrepreneurship. I turned my story into a brand. I turned my story into, now it's going to be a doc series and a movie. So, I have a director that's picking it up and want to transfer it into a movie. So I literally made my story everything.
That's what you do. And that, I could totally relate to that, because that's how this podcast came about, from my struggles with mental health. And, I turned it into technically a brand. It's, you see the backdrop. Let's talk about this, my logo, and everybody could relate to mental health issues. It's a stigma that, that people, we don't talk about, and even in prison. Did you guys have any kind of mental health therapy? Did they come to the inmates and say, look, we need to, prepare these men before they come back out into society? Did they even offer that? And that's one of the things that I noticed about the prison system. Has that ever happened?
I'm so glad you asked the question, because the answer to the question is no. Now think about this. People are incarcerated for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Some people, my brother, almost 30 years of incarceration. And there has not been one psych comes to him to give him any type of mental health counsel, advice, nothing. There has been no psychiatric. No, all of the psychs are only there to get the inmates to be prescribed to medication, but they're not trying to deal with the root cause of what the mental ailment is.
Right.
And we know, once again, prison is an extension of the plantation. So what people suffer from in prison is the same thing they suffer from on the plantations. And what we call now is the plantation psychosis. There's a lot of men, almost, I would say up to 80% of the men incarcerated deals with some form of prison psychosis.
Mm-hmm.
The institutionalization. When
Yep.
people say, oh, he's institutionalized, that's what we're talking about.
Right.
We're talking about the mental health decline
Mm-hmm.
of these men up in there. And it's because they lack the education,
Right.
they lack the support, and they lack the mental health counsel. So
Mm-hmm.
there's no counsel in those type of places for men to reform their thinking, to rehabilitate their ways. There's no programs in there that's geared towards the mental health aspect of it. So it really requires a person to go into and tap into his soul, because as we know, if your mind is disturbed, in your mind you having mental health issues, more than likely you're also having spiritual issues as well. So what I did was I addressed the root cause of my spirit and my spiritual issues to then I would like to say, help me address my mental health issues. So if my spirit is feeling good because I know that I'm connected with God and God has me, he's providing for me, he's protecting me, he's lifting my spirit up, then at that point, I can refer that, or I can transfer that communication or that sense of feeling to my mind, right? To have my mind now go into a space of what we call solace, serenity, right?
Peace. Gives you so much peace of mind.
Peace of mind. Peace of mind. A lot of people say, man, how are you smiling in prison? Well, the reason why I was able to smile in prison because my mind wasn't in prison.
That's right.
My mind was free.
That's right.
While I was in prison. People didn't understand that concept.
That connection with God is so powerful.
It was the connection. It was the connection. You see what I'm saying? So a lot of people like to compartmentalize these type of things, right? They say, well, you have to have your mental health right and then your physical health right. No, you have to have it all right. It's all together. It's all together. The mind, the body, the soul, the spirit, it's all together. You can't tell me that you mentally right, you mentally health, and you sound mentally health, but your body is struggling. Something is out of whack.
It's all, it all works together.
It all works together.
All works together. Once you get that connection with God, because I know, like, you know, if you don't have no connection with God, you're going to go and do, you know, you're going to go outside of what God wants you to do. God is so powerful. I mean, man, I feel like testifying right now because he did so much in my life. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, he's my guidance. I mean, I know if I get off track and if I get off that spiritual connection, is going to lead me off to doing something that I shouldn't be doing. And, you know, like you said, that connection with God and educating yourself and getting your body right, man, you know how strong of a person and how powerful you could be. That's what I'm talking about, man. It's just so powerful. I'm testifying right now, but God is so powerful. And then listening to your story, it's just bringing so much good energy. I mean, so good. I want to meet you in person. If I gotta come out to LA, I just want to come out to LA just to give you a hug, you know, just we're gonna grab you and hug you or something.
We're gonna do a digital hug right now.
Yeah, we'll do a digital hug. Oh my God, I am so happy. I'm so proud. I love hearing stories like this, you know, and it's just so powerful for people to listen to this story. And then now you are a poet too.
Yes, I'm a poet. So I just released this book, My Life in Poetry. And Life in Poetry was a compilation of
look at you. You're showing off now.
But see, now I'm gonna show you how I turned my mental health issues into healing.
Right.
This is how I turned my trauma into healing. This is how I turned my depression into healing. This is how I transformed my mental breakdowns into forms of healing. And I did it through the medium of writing. So I was writing my thoughts. I was writing it in forms of poetry. And then what I did was I kept it all. I kept all of my poems. And I said, you know what? My words are going to become gold one day. These words are going to become gold one day. And recently, I had a whole bag of it. Once again, I'm looking at it and I'm like, I need to do something with this.
Right.
Showing up, I started to pick poems out and do the whole process. And 70 days later, I got
You
my life.
came up with that. You know what? I could never understand why. It's funny because I had so many different uh therapists come on this podcast. I had doctors come on this podcast. I had mental health advocates come on this podcast. And the one thing they always mention was journaling, writing things down, taking things out of your head and putting it down on paper. No matter what it is you're going through that day, what it is, I mean, it could be anything, just writing it down because we have so much stuff in our mind that we carry. And that was something I had to discipline myself to do. It took a minute to do it because I wasn't used to writing things down. I was so used to carrying things around in my head. But then I was like, you know what? And then I look back at it and I said, oh my God, now I understand why. You know, pieces of the puzzle just start to come together. That's
Yeah.
amazing, man. I'm just loving your story. And then you connected, you said you're getting ready to do a documentary too?
Yes, so the documentary has already been in production. They've been filming me since about 2 years now.
Okay.
Different aspects. So I had went to Saudi Arabia as well. And fun fact is I'd never been out of the state of California, but I've been out of the country.
Wow. Ain't that something? Wow. Look at you. Look at God.
Yeah.
Look at God. We always got to give God the glory.
Absolutely.
That's where it comes from.
Glory
Always.
be to God. And here's another fun fact. I never, at one point, I've never had been in an airplane before until the first time I entered to an airplane to jump out of it, skydiving. So that just lets you know the I guess you could say how grander things happens in my life.
Use my dog. He likes to be in the interviews all the time. He was nudging me the whole time, and I'm like,
no, he hears this vibration. He feels energy. He's like,
he's feeling the energy. So he want to be a part of it. That's so amazing.
Yeah. So this is what happens when you let go and you let God.
That's right.
This is what happens when you get outside of your own way.
I was just getting ready to say that.
Oh wow, you see that? We aligned, right?
Yep, we aligned. Yep.
Yeah, and so that's what I did. I had to let go and let God, and ever since I've been letting go and letting God, I've been winning since.
You've been winning ever since. See how things just take off when you get out of your own way and you just let God just, because sometimes we be fighting God, trying to do things on our own. And it took me a long time to realize I can't do this by myself. I need God. Right. I need God to guide me on purpose. He gave me this purpose for this mental health and wellness podcast.
Yes.
I struggle with it. My mother struggled with it. My grandmother struggled with it. And somebody had to break the curse in my family. And I was the one to break this curse because I don't want it to go to my grandkids. I don't want it to go to my great grandkids, Yes. And it's just how you take pain and you turn it into purpose, like you said. That's amazing. Now, where could people get the book? Where could people get your books? They're all over the country. I don't even know why I asked that question.
I would love to direct people to my website, gritgrindandglory.com. You can purchase the books there. But I also understand that folks have Amazon accounts, so they can purchase the book on Amazon. I love to encourage people to get the Audible book because it is a audio book as well.
Okay.
And this book with the audio book, it has a cinematic effect. So it's going to feel like you in the movies, in the theater.
Really?
Right? Oh, it's so good.
Okay, I'm going to get that. I'm going to do when this interview is over. I'm going to download the book right away because
on my website. It's on my website.
So on the website, okay.
Yeah, if you go to my website, you can download it. And you will have it forever. And again, it's a beautiful, so powerful. I can't wait for you to listen to it.
Yeah,
and I put so much work into it. I did it myself, right? So I audio engineered it. And then I had some sound design. I had to hire a freelancer to do the sound design, but in terms of the editing, I did the editing myself.
Mm-hmm.
It became a great product. And once again, this is a recreating myself, rebranding myself through the Audible book. And again, it has its own feel. It has its own tone. It has its own life. It's its own life. It's different from you reading it because now it's in my voice. Plus, you have the cinematic effect. So it's like a movie.
Right. So you definitely had to do. So that's why you had to do this documentary.
Yes.
Yeah, you definitely had to. Look, you know what? You need a actual movie too. You should film. I'm throwing plugs out there. Film directors, y'all listening to this podcast, y'all need to go ahead and get Anthony McDuffie Jr. You got to do a movie on this. This story is phenomenal. How many lives you touch? How many young Black African men that live in the hood who are in the same situation that you just came from? You know, how many lives that you're saving, or how many lives you're currently saving right now through your book, through your story, your documentary, your audio book, man. And y'all need to get him. You need your own coffee too.
Oh, that's next.
You need your own coffee.
You
need your own coffee. You need to definitely do that, man, because this story, I'm throwing these plugs out there. Y'all, you need a coffee.
Okay,
you definitely,
that's next.
You definitely need.
You know what? It not just a coffee brand, but also a coffee cafe, and that's my next vision. That's my grand vision, because I want a coffee cafe where people can come and enjoy themselves.
Sit down.
Sit down.
Connect with each other.
Community connections. I want to create this component where you get free coffee if you are a creator and you create in the space. So your coffee would be free, your food would be free if you create in the space and invite people in the space. And so I want to create a sort of a incubator for our greatest thinkers and our greatest minds of young people to sort of galvanize around and create content in. And so that's my grander vision for the coffee cafe.
That's what's up. That is what's up. Hey, let me tell you, what is your connection with I'm trying to think of his name. I don't know why I can't think of his name. Nipsey Hussle.
Oh, Nipsey Hussle. So we from the same community.
Okay, South Central LA.
South Central LA is
okay.
But not the same tribe and not the same. So what I mean by community, he's from the Crenshaw district and I'm from the Crenshaw district as well. He grew up on the Crip side. I grew up on the Blood side. So that's our connection. Also, we grew up in the same streets. We played around in the same streets, went around, went to the same schools. Juvenile hall. He was in and out of the juvenile hall system as well before he went to the county jail, etc. So we share the same experiences and we relate to each other in those ways where we shared the same environments and grew up around each other. And he know folks from our side, I know folks from his side, and so that's the extent of the connection.
Right. And you also need to do, I'm trying to get things going for you now. I'm so excited for you. Have you met Wallow?
I have met Wallow.
Wallow.
Excuse me. I haven't met him officially, but I know of Wallow through, his content and all of the great things that Wallow is doing. He is another one who turned his story into glory. He's doing amazing work.
Yeah. Well, Wallow and Gilly, they need to come out and do an interview with you too.
You said it. They hit me up, man.
Yeah, y'all gotta come and do an interview with him. And I'm gonna put this will be aired Friday night at 7:00. But Wallow and Gilly, if y'all listening, make sure y'all go out and connect with Anthony. Wallow did 20 years in prison, and he's out here inspiring young men to keep from going in that negative direction. So y'all they definitely need to hook up with you.
And Wallow, Gilly, tap in.
Yes, definitely tap in. I am so happy for you. I just feel like I've just listening to you. I feel like I've known you for a long time, just listening to this story right now. I feel so connected to you. I feel like you're my son now.
I am your son. I
You
am
are
your
my son
son.
now. And I
I am
have
your
a
son.
son. I only have one son, but now I got two, you
Got two.
know? And I am so happy for you. I am so when I hear stories like this, oh my God, you just about to make me tear up. But
Oh, don't cry, mama.
I'm just so happy for your story. And I could
Oh,
see you
thank
doing
you.
so many amazing things in the future. I could see you
Thank you.
doing a movie. I could see you having a coffee cafe, because you connected people in prison through
Right,
coffee,
right.
and I could just see so many amazing things happening for you in the near future. And I'm so
Thank you.
blessed to have you on. Oh gosh, I'm about to tear up, but I am so blessed to have you
Thank
on this
you.
show. I'm
Thank
so happy for
you.
you.
Thank you, sis.
I
Thank you.
really am.
And them tears of joy.
It's
Please
tears,
express them
it's
tears of
tears.
joy.
Yes,
Please express them tears of joy.
it's
As I
tears.
often say, tears are purification of the soul. We need
Yes,
to purify ourselves. Tearing and crying is a beautiful thing.
it
I don't
is.
run from it. And so
Mm,
I welcome your tears, sister, and thank you so much. And since from this point on, you are my distant mother. So I will be looking out to you and be communicating with you. And yeah, keeping in touch with you. So I appreciate you. And I
yes,
still want to extend that success also unto you and
thank
all the
you.
projects that you have going. And I
Thank
hope
you.
your platform blossoms and
Thank
become
you.
bigger and bigger and bigger times 10 because
Thank
God has a purpose for you as well. And he
That's
has a
true.
plan and guidance for you as well. So we want to continue to water that. We want to continue to speak those words of
Yes, yes,
positivity so that
yes.
it manifests into your life so that you can be the queen you need to be for us,
That's
for
right.
family, and whoever else is listening and whoever
That's
else
right.
is viewing this.
That's right. That's right. We have to keep this we have to keep this going,
Yes.
because there's going to be a day that I'm not going to be here on this earth.
Right.
But we're leaving something behind, and we're leaving it to help the next person and to empower the next person, and thank you, God, for having this
Thank you.
amazing young man on my platform. Anthony, thanks so much for
Thank
taking
you
your
so
time
much.
out.
I really appreciate it.
When that film come out, and I'm putting this out in the air because I know you're gonna I want to be at the premiere. So you
Yeah.
make sure your publicist or somebody
Yeah.
hit me up, because I definitely
Yeah.
want to be there and meet you actually in person.
Oh, well, you
Yeah,
tell my publicist yourself. You mama now, so
that's
you.
right. I'm definitely gonna tell her. Yep, that's right. So y'all can't forget about me. So but thanks again, Anthony, for stopping on. And make sure y'all get his book, get his audio, get everything that he's doing. And that jacket, I can't wait for that to come out, because I'm definitely gonna get that. That's just black power right there, all over you right now.
You
So
spoke up Nipsey Hussle. Let me show you the back. Let me
oh
show you
yeah,
the
yeah.
back.
Oh my God. Oh man, that is fire. That's fire. I can't wait for the clothes to come out. You got so
Oh
much stuff.
yeah, yeah.
And
I got so much going, sis. So stay tuned. Yeah, you gonna know, you gonna see.
oh yeah, yeah, definitely. And Wallow and Gilly, y'all better make sure y'all go out here and y'all get in
And
contact
Wallow
with.
really tap in, man.
Yes, y'all
Real
tap in
talk.
with this young man. Definitely have to tap in,
And for the viewers and the listeners, y'all can hit me up on Instagram,
That's
Grit
right.
Grind _ Glory. My TikTok is Grit Grind and Glory as well. I
Right.
appreciate everybody that's listening, that's viewing. Let's keep it up.
That's right. Yes, right. I mean, I know we have a lot of celebrities out there, but we have a lot of other phenomenal stories that need to be heard and need to be told. And thanks again, Anthony, for
Thank
coming
you
on.
so much, sister. I appreciate you.
Love you, and you keep doing your thing.